Senator Emmanuel Manny Pacquiao and Senator Cynthia Villar. A while ago, Mr. Secretary, I mentioned, because Senator Emmanuel Villanueva is also coming. Emmanuel means God with us. So I made sure that on the left and right, we will have our Senator Emmanuel's with us, because you do need the Lord's blessing in the humongous task of representing the country and taking care of our OFWs across the globe. No? Later, we will allow the Secretary to not only present their priorities, their needs, articulate the issues, but also introduce the DFA family. Just for some housekeeping and administrative matters, just a very short opening statement. I believe in the biblical principle of kung ano yung tatanim, yun ang inyong anihin. And this morning when I was reading my verses for the morning, no, said that when man pleases the Lord, He gives him peace even with his enemies. No? And I think the concept of independent foreign policy has been mentioned so many times in the last few months. In the oath-taking in the palace a few days ago, Senator Shahani also whispered to me that, Alan, I'll send you and the DFA my article on an independent foreign policy, and it's about time that that becomes our policy, no? And I was doing a little bit of research about it, and I think we will agree with these concepts. No? Number one, independent foreign policy means we put the Philippine interest above any other country's interest. Number two, that we are friends to all, but we are not proxies, lackeys, or slaves to any other country, no matter how much we depend on them or on how great the dispute is with them at a certain point in time. And lastly, that we make decisions based on what is good for the country and our people as a whole. So with that short introductory statement and welcoming remarks, may I again welcome the DFA family, but may I also note that we have to approve our rules. The jurisdiction of the committee under subparagraph 12, Section 13, Rule 10 of the Senate Rules, the jurisdiction of the committee is all matters relating to the relations of the Philippines with other nations generally, diplomatic and consular service, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the United Nations Organization, its agencies, multilateral organizations, all international agreements, obligations, and contracts, and overseas Filipinos. Likewise, the Chair would like to manifest the applicability of the rules on the Senate in all proceedings of the committee and the rules of procedure governing inquiries in aid of legislation in case and where the committee performs its oversight duty and conduct investigations on matters within its jurisdiction. No? So may I ask, may I now open, I will now entertain motions to approve our internal rules.
I shall move.
A second motion.
It has been moved and seconded, and may I just also take special note of the presence of Senator Pacquiao that I mentioned a while ago. I asked him to be active in this committee, although he is active in so many committees, because in many diplomatic missions that we will undertake, especially, for example, in the Middle East with OFWs, when we send politicians or bureaucrats, the treatment is just like you're one of them from the other countries. But when we send, or when Senator Pacquiao goes there on his own initiative, through his own generosity or through the organizations he represents, the leaders of that country line up to shake his hand or take pictures, etc. And truly, our people will benefit, no, from a special relationship that can be created by an outstanding Filipino like Senator Pacquiao. So I welcome him to the committee, and I've asked him and a couple more members to also be vice chairman of the committee. So may I ask the senators if anyone has a opening statement before I give the floor to the Secretary Yasay? Mali?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming here, Mr. Secretary, at sa lahat ng mga kasamahan na pumunta kayo dito sa aming paanyaya. Maraming salamat, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Pacquiao. So before the hearing started, I informed the DFA family that they will have as much time as they need in the future, and we would rather tackle 1 or 2 issues at a time so that the Senate and also the media can give full attention to those issues. If you go into 15 issues now, isa o dalawa din lang ang mabibigyan ng focus, and napakaraming maseselan na issues at oportunidad na nasa balikat ngayon ng DFA. But we will give now the floor to Secretary Yasay and allow him to present among others, the priorities, both in terms of treaties and if there's a legislative agenda of the DFA, if he wishes to brief us on certain pressing issues or any other matters that he thinks that the committee should know. And just before I give you the floor, we are studying, Mr. Secretary, the State Department of the U.S. and other foreign ministries, because it seems that other foreign ministries around the world have evolved to much more than just foreign relations and foreign affairs, including not only protection of their citizens, but including their work on the OFWs, intelligence gathering, and even for the countries that are more wealthy, even some diplomatic and economic missions are passed through their foreign affairs department. So being a professor and someone learned in this aspect, please feel free to send to the committee any ideas of also how to strengthen our DFA, or whether we should have a sort of State Department type of setup that we can work on in our legislative agenda. Mr. Secretary, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Allow me first, Your Honor, to congratulate the new membership of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate of the 17th Congress of the Philippines and its new leadership, with the Honorable Senator Alan Peter Cayetano as chair. We also welcome the appointment of designation of Senator Manny Pacquiao as one of the vice chair of this very esteemed committee. I have brought along with me some of the members of the DFA family. I have here on my left Undersecretary Enrique Manalo, who is the Undersecretary for our policy group. I have also on my right Assistant Secretary Teresa De Vega, who serves as my chief coordinator under the Office of the Secretary. I have also Assistant Secretary Charles Jose, the DFA spokesperson, who heads the Office of Public Diplomacy. And then I have Assistant Secretary Leo Ausan, who is the head of the Office of Legal Affairs. I have Assistant Secretary Grace Princesa of the Department Legislative Liaison Unit, and Executive Director Reynaldo Catapang of the Office of the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the Committee on Foreign Relations today on pressing issues concerning the Department of Foreign Affairs, in particular, agreements requiring the Senate's concurrence, and 2, the critical concerns of our migrant workers. We have set the course of our nation's foreign policy relations for the next 6 years with President Rodrigo Roa Duterte as chief architect of our foreign policy. The President has affirmed the Philippines' abiding commitment as a responsible member of the global community by honoring our international obligations and maintaining close partnerships with other nations through sustained bilateral and multilateral dialogues. Our foreign policy is also firmly anchored on ensuring the continued welfare, safety, and progress of our people. The DFA does this through its multifarious tasks, initiatives, and projects covering regional peace efforts, advocating for maritime security, addressing West Philippine Sea matters, combating transnational crimes, including drug and human trafficking, countering violent extremism, coordinating with concerned governments on hostage-taking incidents undertaken by terrorists and lawless elements, fostering inclusive and sustainable development, and providing timely and efficient frontline services, among many others. As we take the next steps in our engagements with the international community, discussions, exchanges, and cooperation between the DFA and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee would be key. Before discussing the two matters under the meeting agenda, allow me to briefly outline the basic pillars of Philippine foreign policy. The DFA remains steadfast as the stalwart leader on the diplomatic front lines to protect, serve, and advance the nation's key interests in the international community. These are for the peace and security of our nation, the growth and prosperity of our economy, and the promotion of the rights and welfare of our people overseas and even those at home. These interests correspond to our basic pillars of foreign policy, namely advancing national security, undertaking economic diplomacy, and protecting and promoting the welfare of overseas Filipinos. Aside from the foreign policy pillars, the DFA is also actively involved in cultural and public diplomacy in promoting the national interests. We continue to work on the future direction of mutually beneficial cooperation with our neighbors and allies across all regions in the multilateral fora. As early as now, we have started working on our ASEAN chairmanship in 2017. The department will be closely involved in the Philippine chairmanship of ASEAN as the organization marks its 50th years of existence. With the tasks and challenges before us, the DFA remains resolute in working closely with the Senate's Foreign Relations Committee in moving the country's foreign policy agenda forward or further forward. This is the commitment of the entire Philippine Foreign Service through our Home Office, the 84 Foreign Service posts, and the 21 regional consular offices and 5 satellite offices across the country. At this juncture, I will now ask our Chief Coordinator, Assistant Secretary Teresa de Vega, to briefly give a survey of what we do under the pillars of foreign policy, after which our Acting Assistant Secretary for Legal Affairs, Leo Alsan, will discuss treaties pending concurrence of the Honorable Senate. He will be followed by Assistant Secretary Rinaldo Catapang, who will present critical migrant workers issues, including the ongoing repatriation of workers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Honorable Chair and honorable members of the committee. Just to give the honorable members of the committee a brief survey of some of the activities, initiatives, and projects which the department undertakes under the basic pillars of foreign policy. As the Secretary mentioned, we have the preservation and enhancement of national security, and under this particular pillar, among the principles that we undertake Among the things we undertake is to help preserve the integrity of Philippine territory through peaceful means and advocacy for a rules-based international order. We are also involved in enhancing Philippine responses to terrorism, transnational crimes, and other threats to national security through bilateral and multilateral cooperation. Some of the activities we undertake under this particular pillar include undertaking bilateral strategic dialogues, political and policy consultations with other countries. We also have joint commissions on bilateral cooperation, or JCBCs, and joint commission meetings, or JCMs. We help in negotiating agreements. No matter what the subject matter is, the DFA is always involved, whether it's a defense agreement, a strategic agreement, agreement on sharing of intelligence between law enforcement agencies, for example. The DFA is involved in all these matters. We put forth Philippine positions on regional and multilateral issues in multilateral and regional fora such as the UN, ASEAN, the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum. We participate in the planning, coordination, and undertaking and execution of high-level exchanges of visits between our officials and the officials of foreign governments. We also undertake campaigns for the international candidatures of the Philippines in multilateral and international bodies, and we are also involved in the hosting of international meetings, conferences, and summits. For the second pillar of Philippine foreign policy, which is the promotion and attainment of economic security, or what we call in short in the department, economic diplomacy. We help the Philippine government's economic team in intensifying efforts to secure foreign investments and trade to support local industries and to further develop the job creation. Under this pillar, we participate in negotiations for economic and trade-related agreements. We participate actively in international economic fora, such as the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. Just last year, the DFA led the substantive preparations for the Philippines' chairmanship of APEC in 2015. We also participate actively in other regional bodies, in international bodies such as the World Trade Organization, the EU. We are also involved with other agencies in negotiating air services agreements, tourism agreements. We assist in undertaking inbound and outbound trade and investment missions. We also participate in the promotion of goods, products, and services, and investment areas and sites in the Philippines, as well as in promoting Philippine tourism. For our third pillar, which is the protection of the rights and promotion of the welfare of overseas Filipinos and other frontline services, we are strengthening initiatives for better delivery of consular services and assistance to nationals overseas. This includes, among others, which will be elaborated on by our colleague from the Migrant Workers Office, assistance to nationals, repatriation, legal assistance for our compatriots abroad, consular services, and also harnessing the Filipino diaspora for development. And aside from the three pillars of Philippine foreign policy, the department being at the front lines of representing the Philippines abroad, we are also heavily involved in cultural and public diplomacy. We help promote Philippine culture and the enhancement of the image of the Philippines abroad. We do this through cultural projects in cooperation with other government agencies like the National Commission on Culture and the Arts, the Cultural Center of the Philippines, the Film Development Board, and other non-government groups. We aim to promote the diversity of Philippine arts and culture. We organize exhibits, performances, artist exchanges. We help to secure scholarships and fellowships for our artists and academics. Just in the last 2 years, we participated in the Venice Biennale for Art and Architecture. We also conduct lectures by Filipino academics abroad, and part of our work is also public diplomacy. We continue to undertake education efforts and information efforts on pressing issues such as the West Philippine Sea, ASEAN. Last year, we were heavily invested in educating the public on APEC, on the Philippine chairmanship of APEC. And lastly, one of the major things we will be engaged in, as the Secretary mentioned, in the coming months will be advancing Philippine security and economic interests through ASEAN. And this will be highlighted by our chairmanship next year, which also coincides with the 50th anniversary of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Secretary, before we continue, may I acknowledge the presence of the other Emmanuel I was mentioning a while ago, Emmanuel Joel Villanueva, and the chairman of the Committee on National Defense, who will be working on together in reviewing and strengthening the EDCA, Senator Gregorio Gringo Honasan.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Secretary, I came in late. No? Ladies and gentlemen, I was going to ask, if it was not taken up, have we already clearly defined what constitutes our national interest? Let me explain, Mr. Secretary. No? During our time, our foreign policy, our security policy, and our economic policy, for that matter, all policies, could be set in motion on separate tracks. But now, because it's a changing world, because of information technology, the demarcation lines have become so porous. You cannot isolate any effort anymore from the security issues, the economic issues, and other peripheral issues. So, I suppose, but I leave that to your better judgment, I suppose that it must emanate from a very clear definition of what constitutes our national interest. We are now engaged in an attempt to upgrade our national security policy because we are falling back on an 81-year-old law, Commonwealth Act No. 1, National Defense Act, drafted by Major Dwight Eisenhower and William Ord. So, ganun ho tayo, Mr. Secretary, medyo nahuhuli ng konti. Ever since, no, we have been witness, painfully, to a policy vacuum. So, I was going to put that on your doorstep so that maybe we can come to terms with how we should prosecute our foreign policy. So, thank you. If you would honor us with a response.
Just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, the national interest cannot be definitely and technically defined. In general terms, it could only mean promoting the general welfare, what is in the best interest and common interest of the Filipino people, our nation, what will promote our independence and sovereignty, our territorial integrity, even our economic interests. These are broadly defined, but the actual pursuit of a specific area of national interest will always be dependent, to my mind, upon the exigencies of a particular time. As you had said, the developments in the geopolitical world and reality continues to change, and the national interest must always be seen in the light of these changes. The President, being the architect of our foreign policy, is the key official, the sole official that will define, in this particular instance, a given national interest at a particular time. So I do not think it will be prudent for us to really come up with a technical definition of what is in the national interest that will not change. Suffice it to say that the Constitution of the Philippines defines how we conduct our foreign policy, how we conduct our foreign relations in the light of promoting the national interest, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and our right of self-determination. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, just I will trust your judgment on this. No? I guess you know where I came from. No? I think I'm a better soldier than a politician. I was just thinking of our remote, isolated detachment in the West Philippine Sea. No? I guess to a soldier, what you just shared with us would be valid, but if I may say so, it would be abstract to them, no? Para bang, Mr. Secretary, the question that must be answered in their hearts and in their minds is, ano ba talaga ang poprotektahan ko rito? Is it our economic zone, our aquatic resources? Is it our territorial integrity? No? Against an overwhelming power. No. We can accept that. But to me, if that understanding is clear in our front lines, in our borders, then there will be some consistency. I'm just putting that on your doorstep. I know it's it's difficult to sort this out, but I suppose that would be a reasonable starting point. And don't worry po, this will not be the first time we will be meeting. I just wanted to put some momentum into the policy discussions, not to mention the coming budget deliberations. And I'm very happy that in the news last night, not only change is coming, but the letter is coming, where we determine our national priorities. I'm looking forward to the output of that letter, because that will establish in the eyes of our Congress, no, and the Senate, our national order priorities, and there will be better understanding of the directions that we intend to embark on. Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Nasan. Please bear with the sound pollution because DFA is usually more diplomatic. We have a soft tone. Sa kabila po is games and amusement. They're usually very loud. But may I now recognize Senator Gordon.
I'd better save the discussion before Manny Pacquiao, who's the chairman there, declares war on Senator Cayetano. Let me say good afternoon to all my friends here in the Department of Foreign Affairs, who I believe have been doing an excellent job considering the resources that we have and considering the current state of affairs in our country. There are many things that I'd like to ask, but the obvious concern right now of our country is our relations with the big neighbor right beside us, People's Republic of China. And one, I'd like to know what exactly are the relations between our countries. On the one hand, we have a problem with our claims in the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. And on the other hand, we do have a lot of relationships such as trade. And are they using it against us? I understand once upon a time they interdicted our bananas and our mangoes, if I'm not mistaken. And at the same time, we have problems. And the recent one is the one I've written to you, Your Honor, concerning the very disturbing trend, or rather, not a trend, but has been in existence for so long, meaning a lot of drugs are coming from China. When the truth of the matter is that when they catch our people in China, they have a very severe penalty, and they always create a big furor in our country because they would put them not only in submission, but put them into the death penalty. But on the other hand, they keep sending, not as a matter of policy, I hope, but that's up to you to answer that, or the possibility of that being utilized as an instrument upon which we can stabilize, not unlike what happened with the British and China in the early years called the Opium War, to destabilize our country. So, where are the red lines? To be very specific, where are the red lines that you've established with our government? And you don't have to answer if it's a matter of national security. And Senator Ronaldo is here. For example, should China put in another reclaimed land on what are really not rocks but not really islands, what are our courses of action? And what are our courses of action with respect to the other reclaimed areas, quotes, which are not recognized as islands by the international community by reason of the Hague decision? Could you give us an overview of that, for starters?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor, the issue specifically with respect to reclamation activities is not so much an issue that directly relates, although it does directly relate also to our rights under the 1982 UNCLOS as a part of our exclusive economic zone and all of our maritime entitlements therein. But specifically, for instance, these reclamation activities are the concern also of the international community, because regardless of our exclusive economic zone, as recognized under UNCLOS recently by the ruling of the International Tribunal, this territory known as the South China Sea are deemed as international waters. Except, of course, if these are waters within our 12-mile territorial limit or territorial limit of a particular country.
Which have been identified as ours.
Yes, which is ours. But insofar as our rights or sovereignty rights under the exclusive economic zone, we simply exercise sovereignty rights in exclusively exploiting and utilizing the living and non-living resources in this area. But these reclamation activities, while we are obligated and the international community is obligated to make sure that the environmental balance and health of these areas here are properly preserved, these reclamation activities being undertaken by China has impacted negatively on the health and balance of the environment in this area. And this has been a concern that has been expressed by no less than the international community. ASEAN has come up recently in the Asian ministerial meetings, a unified statement expressing its serious concern about these reclamation activities. For the international community, the red line is that this should be stopped. Right now, there should be no further reclamation activities. As I understand it, the United States had indicated to China in no unmistakable terms that their intention to reclaim Scarborough Shoal, for instance, must not proceed. And if they will proceed, for America, the red line is, because that activity will also impede the freedom of navigation, they cannot do that, and they will bear the consequences for that. For the Philippines particularly, sharing the same concerns with the international community, there is no red line for us in terms of saying that these reclamation activities sit on features that belong to the Philippines. These reclamation activities do not touch on this particular issue because precisely the territorial ownership of these features have not been clearly defined under international law. Suffice it to say, for instance, that if we have our vessels, public vessels, plying this area and we are being fired upon by the Chinese for one reason or another, then the Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States will kick in, and that is, in that sense, a red line for us. But that is insofar as these particular reclamation activities are concerned, Your Honor, Mr.
And do you
Chairman.
feel confident that that red line, insofar as these undetermined islands are concerned, which might impede the friendly passage of vessels, would constitute, as you say, a red line to the United States of America, and would mean that they are going to take definitive action?
That is correct, Your Honor. This is what America had made clear to China. Japan has also made this clear to China. We have not expressly indicated the course of action we should take in this regard because of our situation in terms of our military capabilities in this respect.
But obviously, Mr. Chairman, the United States would, we would have to trigger something with the United States when it comes to these intrusions. And as you know, many in our country doubt whether the United States are going direct.